It was a night that redefined the boundaries of modern geopolitics and sent shockwaves through every capital city on Earth, from Moscow to Beijing. On January 3, 2026, under the cover of a moonless Caribbean sky, the world watched in disbelief as the United States executed Operation Absolute Resolve, a military gamble so audacious it eclipsed the invasions of Panama and Grenada combined. The images that emerged the following morning were surreal, showing Nicolas Maduro, the man who had defied Washington for over a decade, being escorted in handcuffs onto the deck of the USS Iwo Jima. To the casual observer watching the news in New York or London, this was presented as a triumph of justice, the final chapter in the hunt for a man labeled by the Department of Justice not just as a dictator, but as the head of the Cartel of the Suns, a narco-terrorist organization accused of flooding American streets with cocaine while starving his own people. The official narrative from the White House was swift and morally absolute, painting a picture of a liberation mission designed to restore democracy to a nation broken by corruption and to halt the flow of millions of migrants destabilizing the American border. They spoke of the stolen elections of 2024, the suppression of dissent, and the alliance with criminal gangs like Tren de Aragua that had spread their tentacles into American suburbs. However, history teaches us that the movement of empires is rarely dictated by morality alone, and if you peel back the layers of diplomatic rhetoric and look at the cold, hard economic realities, a different, darker picture begins to emerge, one that smells less like justice and more like heavy crude. To understand why American boots are on the ground in Caracas, we must look beyond the headlines and stare into the depths of the Orinoco Belt, home to the single largest proven oil reserves on the planet. For years, the mainstream media has focused on the humanitarian crisis, but the strategic planners in Washington have been fixated on a number: 303 billion. That is the number of barrels of oil sitting beneath Venezuelan soil, a staggering amount that exceeds even the reserves of Saudi Arabia. It is a prize so vast that it has defined the destiny of Venezuela for a century, and many analysts argue that this intervention is the culmination of a decades-long strategy to reclaim control over the energy heart of the Western Hemisphere. While the United States is indeed the world's largest oil producer thanks to the shale revolution, there is a critical technical detail that often escapes public discourse but is central to this invasion, and that is the specific chemistry of oil. The shale oil produced in Texas and North Dakota is light and sweet, but the massive, complex refinery infrastructure along the U.S. Gulf Coast was built decades ago specifically to process heavy, sour crude. For years, these refineries have been starved of their preferred feedstock due to sanctions on Venezuela, forcing them to buy from other sources at higher premiums. But with Maduro out of the picture and a U.S.-backed transitional government installed, the taps can be turned back on, flowing directly into the veins of American industry. This creates a perfect symbiotic loop where American companies like Chevron and ExxonMobil can return to the fields they were once forced to abandon, repairing the dilapidated infrastructure and securing a cheap, steady supply of heavy crude that is immune to the volatility of the Middle East. Furthermore, the timing of this operation reveals the intense geopolitical chess match that has been playing out in Latin America. For the past decade, as Washington pulled back, adversaries like Russia and China moved in, loaning billions to the Maduro regime in exchange for oil shipments and future assets. China had effectively become the primary creditor of Venezuela, securing long-term energy supplies, while Russia utilized the country as a strategic foothold in America's backyard, occasionally parking nuclear-capable bombers in Caracas to send a message. By physically removing Maduro and dismantling his regime, the United States has effectively voided these alliances, kicking the geopolitical legs from under Beijing and Moscow in the Western Hemisphere. It is a move reminiscent of the Monroe Doctrine, a forceful declaration that the Americas remain under the exclusive sphere of influence of the United States. President Trump's recent comments about utilizing Venezuelan oil revenue to offset the costs of the military operation only solidify the argument that this is, at its core, a resource acquisition strategy disguised as a humanitarian intervention. When the president stated that the United States would now oversee the rehabilitation of the oil sector, it confirmed the worst fears of anti-imperialist critics who have long chanted no blood for oil. The narrative of saving Venezuela serves as a palatable cover for a desperate need to secure energy dominance in a world where global supply chains are fracturing. We must also consider the internal political pressure within the United States regarding the migration crisis, which was undoubtedly a trigger, but a military invasion of this scale is rarely launched solely to stop migrants. It is launched to secure assets. The seizure of the Venezuelan state apparatus allows Washington to control the tap, determining who gets the oil and at what price, thereby weaponizing energy policy to punish rivals and reward allies. The tragic irony is that the Venezuelan people, who have suffered under hyperinflation and authoritarianism, are now watching their national sovereignty evaporate as foreign tanks roll through their streets, not just as liberators, but as new managers of their natural wealth. The removal of Maduro was the easy part. The challenge now lies in the occupation and the reconstruction of a petrostate that has been hollowed out by corruption. As we watch the footage of American flags flying over Venezuelan oil fields, we have to ask ourselves if we are witnessing the restoration of democracy or a hostile corporate takeover on a sovereign scale. The events of January 3, 2026 will likely be remembered not for the liberation of a people, but as the moment that the United States decided that the strategic imperative of controlling the world's largest oil reserve outweighed the risks of international condemnation. In the end, the operation may bring stability, and it may bring cheap gas to American pumps, but the price tag is the independence of a South American nation that had the misfortune of sitting on top of too much black gold. This is not just a story about a dictator falling. It is a story about an empire securing its future fuel, proving once again that in the high-stakes game of global power, geology is destiny, and the road to Caracas was paved not with good intentions, but with the irresistible allure of 300 billion barrels of oil.